If you have a problem, just leave.
The person who said that to me as I confronted my sister was my husband, Ryan, wearing a smug grin. Today was my sister Emily's wedding day. I wasn't in the mood to celebrate Emily, who had always looked down on me, but I eventually decided to attend because she begged me to come. However, at the reception, the only dish that was brought to me was a single pastry. Trembling with anger, I walked straight up to Emily and confronted her in a stern voice, despite its quietness. "Hey, what is the meaning of this?"
What are you talking about?
"Don't play dumb. Inviting me to your wedding only to serve me a pastry. How far do you have to go with your petty stunts to feel satisfied?"
It wasn't just to be petty. I was kinda hoping you'd get mad and leave.
"What do you mean?" I furrowed my brow, trying to understand her true intention, and Emily started explaining her plan. It turns out she wanted to provoke me into storming out of the wedding, using that as an excuse to get me to drop out of the inheritance dispute. I was stunned by how malicious the plan was when, before I realized it, my husband Ryan had approached and said, "If you have a problem, just leave. Why are you siding with her?" Before Ryan could answer, Emily responded instead.
Oh, Ryan was more than happy to help when I said I'd give him a share of the inheritance. Face it, you're loved by no one.
Emily spoke with a victorious tone, and Ryan, who had joined forces with her to humiliate me, didn't even flinch. Overwhelmed by their malice and the stares from others, I couldn't bear it anymore. Even though I knew I was giving Emily exactly what she wanted, I bolted from the reception hall, practically fleeing. Anger, sadness, frustration. As I stood waiting for a taxi, weighed down by that mess of emotions, Emily, who had just spent the entire evening tormenting me, came running toward me, her wedding dress dragging behind her. The moment she saw me, her face twisted with panic, and she cried out,
Help me, Chloe.
"My name is Chloe, and I'm 32 years old. Born as the eldest daughter of an ordinary family, I was raised surrounded by my parents' love. In a world where terms like toxic parents are often thrown around, I've always thought of myself as lucky to have such kind and supportive parents. However, despite having such wonderful parents, my childhood wasn't as happy as one might expect. The reason for that was my younger sister, Emily, who is 2 years younger than me. Emily was incredibly beautiful and smart, adored and spoiled by everyone since she was little. In contrast, I was average in both looks and brains, constantly being compared to her and often the subject of harsh gossip and belittling comments. I might have been able to endure that alone. What truly broke me was that Emily herself looked down on me. She would go out of her way to torment me, relishing the sight of me crying or upset. If our parents had witnessed her cruelty, they would have scolded her without hesitation. But clever Emily never bullied me in front of our parents. On the contrary, she would put on an innocent smile, cling to me saying, "Big sis," and act as if we were the closest of siblings. Our parents, completely unaware of her performance, genuinely believed we had a great relationship. If I had told them about Emily's harassment, they probably would have believed me. But I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth and shatter their happiness over our so-called sisterly bond. So I endured Emily's mistreatment in silence, never telling a soul. Emily's harassment continued even after we became adults. but by that time, we didn't see each other at home as often as we used to, so the impact wasn't as damaging as it had been during childhood. Also, as I grew older, I became able to brush off her snide remarks, which made things a bit easier. Even so, having Emily in my life remained a source of stress. However, when I got married and moved out, I was finally able to distance myself from her. My husband is a man named Ryan, who is 2 years older than me. After moving out, I now live with Ryan, just the two of us. It's supposed to be the blissful honeymoon phase of our marriage, but I'm already tired of living with him.
What's this? Is this all we're having for dinner? Don't you have anything else?
As soon as he got home from work, Ryan started criticizing the homemade meal I had set on the table. Tonight's dinner was salad, beef stew, and garlic bread. Sure, it wasn't the most extravagant meal, but I had put in the effort to cook despite having a full-time job. Couldn't he show even a little bit of gratitude? If you don't want to eat it, then don't, I said coldly, and he frowned as he sat down.
I didn't say that. You've got such a nasty attitude.
Without even saying, "Thanks for the meal," Ryan began eating dinner while scrolling through his phone. Despite all his complaining, he was devouring the food, practically eating like he intended to finish my portion too. I had no desire to sit down and eat with him, but if I didn't, he'd scarf down everything. Reluctantly, I sat at the table and began eating in silence. Before we got married, Ryan was a kind and thoughtful man. I fell in love with that side of him and decided to marry him. But was that kindness just an act? The moment we got married, his demeanor completely changed. He became like a different person. Before we got married, he used to say things like, "Let's share the household chores as much as we can," but now he leaves everything to me. And yet, he still finds reasons to complain about things like dinner. I also came to realize after some time that his change in attitude was at least partly connected to my father's company. My father was the CEO of a major corporation, but a year ago, he stepped down due to health issues and handed the company over to his successor so he could focus on his recovery. It seems that Ryan assumed I would eventually take over my father's position and married me, expecting to benefit from that connection. However, I had my own dreams and had never even considered joining my father's company. When Ryan found out after our marriage that his expectations had completely fallen through, he became resentful, and his attitude toward me grew cold. I had no idea he married me with such a calculated mindset, so learning the truth was a huge shock. Even so, considering my modest income and not wanting to worry my ailing father, I couldn't bring myself to make the immediate decision to divorce. So, I reluctantly continued my married life with Ryan. Meanwhile, Emily decided on her own to join my father's company and seems to be steadily climbing the career ladder. However, she apparently shows little concern for our ailing father. Since our mother has already passed away, I visit my father from time to time to check on him. But Emily hardly ever returns home, maybe only a few times a year, if that. My father smiled and said, "Emily's probably busy with a lot of things," but his expression seemed a little lonely. Then one day, I got a rare phone call from Emily.
Hey, Chloe. I'm getting married soon. You're coming to my wedding, right?
I was surprised by the sudden announcement, but when I thought about it, Emily was already 30 years old. It wasn't surprising that she had someone she was dating. A wedding is supposed to be a happy occasion, but I still don't care much for Emily. If possible, I wanted to decline the invitation. As I hesitated to respond, Emily, seemingly sensing my thoughts, spoke in an uncharacteristically soft voice.
Dad said it'll be hard for him to attend because of his illness. If you don't come, there won't be anyone sitting in the family seats.
Hearing that my father wouldn't be attending made me even less inclined to go. Unable to make a decision right away, I simply replied, "I'll think about it," and hung up the phone. Just then, Ryan, who I'd barely had any real conversations with lately, spoke to me for a change.
Something happened?
My sister, Emily's getting married. She wants me to come to her wedding.
Wow, that's great news. You're going, right?
Ryan spoke as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, and I frowned as I answered, "Don't make it sound so simple. You know about my relationship with her, don't you?" I had told Ryan about the rift between me and Emily before we got married. Still, I couldn't believe he was casually encouraging me to attend.
I know you told me about that, but it wouldn't hurt to go to her wedding, would it?
At Ryan's words, I fell silent, thinking for a moment. To be honest, I couldn't care less whether Emily got married or not, but Ryan might be right. Maybe I should attend the wedding as family, at the very least. It would be sad if none of her family members attended the wedding. Even though I wasn't enthusiastic about it, I eventually decided to attend Emily's wedding. And so, the day of the wedding arrived. Emily had also invited Ryan along with me, so the two of us headed to the venue together. The wedding proceeded without a hitch, and Emily, dressed in her wedding gown, stood before the priest with the groom, pledging eternal love. It was supposed to be a deeply moving moment, but I felt nothing in particular. I simply watched the ceremony out of a sense of obligation and gave a half-hearted round of applause. Next to me, Ryan was smiling, looking more like real family than I did. After the ceremony, it was time for the reception. By this point, I was already exhausted, but leaving early wasn't an option. Mustering the last of my strength, I headed to the reception hall with Ryan. We took our seats and waited for the reception to begin.
The bride and groom will now make their entrance.
At last, the reception began, and Emily, now in a glamorous gown, entered with her groom. She smiled as she walked down the aisle between the guests, and at one point, she glanced at me and gave a small, knowing smile. That smile sent a wave of unease through me, but I couldn't very well stop her mid-entrance to demand an explanation. I frowned and gave a half-hearted clap as I watched Emily pass by. Once the bride and groom took their seats, the welcome speeches and toasts concluded, and the staff began bringing out the food. One of the best parts of a wedding is getting to enjoy gourmet dishes you wouldn't normally have the chance to eat. I was looking forward to at least enjoying the meal, so I waited eagerly for my plate to arrive. The first dish was placed in front of Ryan, a lavish plate that only heightened my anticipation. Then, the staff placed a dish in front of me, but to my shock, it was a single pastry. I was so stunned that my mouth fell open and I froze in place. However, I quickly regained my composure and hastily called out to a nearby staff member. "Well, isn't this some kind of mistake?" The staff member gave me an awkward look, glancing back and forth between the pastry and Emily before responding.
Well, This was a special request from the bride. She said, "My sister loves pastries, so please prepare one just for her."
At that response, I understood everything. Emily was pulling another one of her cruel pranks on me. I realized that keeping the staff any longer would only make things awkward for him, so I thanked him and let him go. He nodded politely, though he still looked confused, and walked away. Just then, a loud burst of laughter rang out from beside me. Startled, I turned to see Ryan laughing as if he found the whole thing hilarious, despite the situation. I glanced over at Emily, and sure enough, she was laughing too, along with her groom, as they both mocked me. It seemed that this prank wasn't just Emily's doing. The groom and Ryan were in on it too. I had felt something was off when Ryan insisted I attend the wedding, and now I knew why. Trembling with anger, I marched up to Emily and, despite keeping my voice low, demanded an explanation in a firm tone. "Hey, what is the meaning of this?
What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb. You went out of your way to invite me to your wedding only to serve me a pastry? How far do you need to go with your harassment to be satisfied?" Emily giggled softly and leaned in, speaking in a low voice so no one else could hear.
It wasn't just to mess with you. I was hoping you'd get angry and leave.
What do you mean? I frowned, unable to grasp her true intention. If she didn't want me at her wedding so badly, she shouldn't have invited me in the first place. It wasn't like I wanted to be here. If skipping the wedding had been an option, I would have gladly stayed away. Emily smirked and said something nonsensical. I thought that wouldn't be a strong enough reason. What do you mean by strong enough?
As a reason to make you drop out of the inheritance battle.
Stunned by her unexpected words, I stared at her in disbelief as she began proudly explaining her true motive.
I believe all of Dad's wealth should go to me, the successful one. But if you're around, half of the inheritance would automatically go to you. So I wanted to provoke you into leaving early and then report to Dad that you walked out in the middle of my wedding.
I was speechless at the sheer malice behind Emily's scheme. I had assumed that this outrageous act was simply because she hated me, but I never imagined it was all about the inheritance. Realizing her true aim, I felt a chill run through me as I cautiously asked, "Did you join Dad's company for that reason too?"
Of course. It was all to make the company mine. That's why I went out of my way to marry the heir of one of our business partners.
The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. To use marriage as a tool to gain wealth. In a daze, I looked over at the groom. He was grinning smugly, just like Emily. It was clear that he knew everything and had married her fully aware of her ambitions. It became clear to me that their relationship was purely transactional, with no trace of genuine affection between them. At that moment, Ryan, who had come up beside me without me noticing, sneered and said,
If you've got a problem, just leave.
I turned to him with a look of utter disgust and asked in a voice as cold as ice, "And why are you helping Emily with this?" It wasn't Ryan who answered. Emily let out a gleeful laugh and said in a triumphant tone,
Oh, Ryan was more than happy to help when I said I'd share the inheritance with him. Face it, you're not loved by anyone.
She seemed overjoyed that Ryan had taken her side. Emily seemed to be basking in her sense of superiority. That expression of hers was all too familiar. and it stirred painful memories from the past. Emily had always loved isolating me. Whenever my friends started siding with her, she would wear that same smug look she had now. I had hoped that she'd matured a little as an adult, but this moment painfully reminded me how naive I'd been. Emily hadn't changed at all since we were kids. Just then, I felt the weight of eyes on me and glanced around. The guests were all watching us, observing the tense scene unfold. Even though we had been speaking in hushed voices, our hostile atmosphere must have clued them in that something was wrong. People were whispering to one another, their expressions filled with concern. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, the weight of their stares made me feel unbearably uncomfortable. Then my eyes fell on the pastry sitting on the table in front of me, and in that instant, I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. Even though I knew it was exactly what Emily wanted, I fled the hall as though escaping. Anger, sadness, frustration. Carrying all those tangled emotions, I stood waiting for a taxi when I suddenly heard Emily's voice behind me. "Chloe, help me!" I turned around and saw Emily, dragging her dress as she ran toward me, her face on the verge of tears. I furrowed my brow, unable to grasp the situation, but I decided it was no longer my concern and moved to get into the taxi. Just then, someone else called out to me.
"Chloe."
A hand gently rested on my shoulder as I turned to see my father, his face stern. I widened my eyes in surprise and froze. In the meantime, my father apologized to the driver and sent the taxi away. "Dad, when did you get here?"
"I was already there when the reception started. I saw you leaving the hall."
When Emily's wedding was finalized, I had told my father about it. However, my father hadn't been informed of the wedding by Emily, which struck him as strange. Looking back now, it was clear that Emily had purposely kept the wedding a secret from him to ensure he wouldn't find out about her scheme. Unaware of this at the time, I decided to secretly invite my father to the reception as a surprise for Emily, who loved surprises. I had already coordinated everything with the staff and framed it as a surprise gift for the bride. After getting approval from my father's doctor, we arranged for him to make a brief appearance at the reception. I hadn't known his exact plans for the day, but it seemed he arrived early and waited quietly. When he saw me rushing out of the hall, he was alarmed and immediately went to Emily. Emily, her husband, and Ryan must have been completely shocked when my father suddenly appeared.
She was so flustered she couldn't explain anything, but the guests told me what happened. "I can't believe the three of them conspired to harass you like that, Chloe."
My father glared at Emily with a furious expression, his face like that of a demon. Emily began trembling, visibly frightened. It was the first time I'd ever seen my gentle, soft-spoken father so visibly enraged. I was shocked, but Emily, who was on the receiving end of his fury, must have been even more stunned. The reason she came after me was probably to escape our father's wrath, even if only for a moment.
"What kind of grudge do you have against Chloe? Why would you do something like that?"
No, Dad. You've got it all wrong. Chloe loves pastries, so I thought I was doing something nice for her.
She tried to make me walk out of the wedding and use that as an excuse to cut me out of the inheritance. Emily's face twisted in shock at my sudden interjection. But I didn't care about her reaction anymore. I had decided to tell my father everything, including everything that had happened up until now. "Dad, this isn't the first time she's harassed me." Hearing about the countless ways Emily had tormented me, my father's eyes widened in disbelief. As he learned the full details of her latest scheme, his face grew red with fury. His entire body trembled as he grabbed Emily's arm firmly, making her pale with fear.
What?
Just come with me.
With surprising strength for someone battling illness, my father stormed back into the reception hall. I hurried after him, trying to keep up. When we entered the hall, the room was in an uproar. It was no surprise, after all. The bride had abruptly run out in her wedding dress. My father, looking calm despite the chaos, took the microphone from the bewildered MC and apologized to the guests.
Thank you all for taking the time to be here today. I sincerely apologize for how things have turned out. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we will be canceling today's wedding.
A louder wave of shocked murmurs spread through the hall. But my father remained completely unfazed, continuing with calm authority.
Of course, any gifts and monetary offerings will be returned. As a token of our apology, we invite you to enjoy the meal that has been prepared. Please at least stay and enjoy the food.
After offering one final, sincere apology, my father led both couples, my sister and her groom, as well as their families, into a private room. As soon as everyone was gathered, my father turned to Emily and delivered his verdict without mercy.
First, you're disowned. I no longer consider you my daughter.
Wait. Dad. You can't disown me. Please, no.
Without sparing a glance at Emily, who was crying and shouting in despair, my father turned his attention to the groom and his family.
As for your company, I'm terminating our contract effective immediately. I'll personally inform your CEO, so you should prepare for that.
The color drained from their faces all at once. The groom and his mother were utterly devastated, too shocked to speak, but the groom's father couldn't stay silent. Though pale and trembling, he managed to force out a rebuttal.
I apologize for what my son has done, but isn't this a separate matter? Personal grievances should never interfere with business relationships.
My decision wasn't based on personal feelings alone. Your company has been operating in the red for quite some time, hasn't it? With no signs of improvement, I had already planned to terminate the contract sooner or later.
My father's calm rebuttal left the groom's father speechless. His shoulders slumped, and he stared blankly into the distance, completely defeated. Seeing his father in such a state, the groom furrowed his brows and stormed toward Emily.
This is all your fault. Look what you've done.
What? You were on board with this plan too. Don't you dare pin everything on me now.
And so, the couple's argument began. My father watched their ugly blame game with a cold, indifferent gaze. I also watched their exchange with a sense of disbelief and disgust. Then, I suddenly glanced over at my own husband. Ryan, acting as though none of this concerned him, was casually scrolling through his phone. I marched straight over to him, and as he looked up at me with a puzzled expression, I spoke firmly. We're getting a divorce.
What?
Ryan's eyes widened as he shouted in disbelief at my sudden declaration.
Divorce? Are you kidding me? What did I even do?
You teamed up with Emily to sabotage me. If anyone should be saying this is ridiculous, it's me. As Ryan tried to brazenly shout me down, I raised my voice even louder, throwing my fury right back at him. Perhaps overwhelmed by my anger, Ryan's face twisted nervously as he stumbled a step backward. After shooting Ryan a glare, I turned to Emily and made my declaration. I'm going to demand compensation from both you and Ryan.
Compensation?
What are you talking about, Chloe?
They both shouted in shock, their voices nearly overlapping, but I didn't let it faze me and continued. After everything you've done, you didn't seriously think you'd walk away without consequences, did you? You're adults. Take responsibility for your actions.
For something like this, you're really asking for compensation?
Chloe. I'm sorry.
Emily's voice cut off Ryan's indignant protest as she rushed over to me, apologizing desperately. It was the first time in my entire life that Emily had ever apologized to me.
It was all my fault. I'll never do anything like this again. Please, forgive me.
Emily's eyes shimmered with tears as she looked up at me, clinging desperately. With her beautiful face contorted into such a pleading expression, most people would probably feel their hearts soften. But to me, someone who knew her true nature, it was nothing but an act. She wasn't genuinely remorseful. She just didn't want to pay compensation and was pretending to be sorry. There was no point in listening to such an insincere apology. And even if she were truly sorry, I couldn't possibly forgive her after everything she had done. Looking down at Emily as she begged, I coldly declared, "It's useless. Save your breath and get the money ready."
That's so cruel. I'm apologizing. Can't you just forgive me?
I sighed in exasperation, covering my face as Emily continued to wail and play the victim. Emily had always been like this. Whenever things didn't go her way, she would cry and paint me as the villain. But this time, there was no one left to side with her. Even her groom was looking at her with a cold, disinterested expression. Just as I was about to put an end to her pathetic performance, I noticed something was wrong with my father. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead, and his face was twisted in pain. He should have been resting, but the stress and exertion had clearly taken a toll on his health. Panicked, I rushed to his side and steadied his swaying body. "Dad, are you okay? Let's go back home."
Wait a minute. Are you trying to run away? This conversation isn't over yet.
I wrapped my arm around my father's trembling shoulders and walked away, leaving Emily behind as she continued to selfishly make a scene. After escorting my father home, I returned to my own house. My decision to get a divorce hadn't changed, but issues like finances and finding a place to live meant I couldn't leave immediately. As I began packing my things to prepare for the move, Ryan came home late at night and approached me with a sickeningly sweet voice.
Come on, don't be so mad. I'm sorry for what happened today. Let's not rush into this whole divorce thing, okay?
He gave my shoulder a light pat, and a wave of revulsion spread through my entire body. It seemed my body was completely rejecting him now. "Stop it." I jerked away, swatting his hand aside, his expression darkened with irritation. But perhaps realizing that arguing wouldn't help his case, he forced a strained smile.
Come on, Don't be like that. If your income's suddenly gone, things are gonna get tough around here, and I need you to keep handling the housework too.
Hearing his true feelings, I let out a sigh. I had expected as much. He wasn't against the divorce because he didn't want to lose me, but because he didn't want to lose the financial support and the free labor I provided at home. I had no intention of wasting my life any longer for someone like that. That said, I couldn't ignore the fact that I didn't have a stable income of my own and was still dependent on his. A quick divorce was going to be difficult. As I wrestled with these thoughts, days passed, and we continued our daily routines as if nothing had happened. Ryan, convinced that I had given up on the idea of divorce, started acting arrogant again. But, of course, I hadn't given up at all. I was simply figuring out how to survive on my current income once I was on my own. One quiet afternoon on a weekend, our doorbell rang, even though we weren't expecting any visitors. Puzzled, I opened the door and found an elderly man in a suit standing there with a young woman by his side. Thinking they might be salespeople, I cautiously asked, "Hi, who are you?" Just then, Ryan, who had only just woken up around noon, shuffled over lazily, yawning as he approached.
Who is it on a day off? If it's a salesperson, just send them away.
His tone was rude as he glanced at the visitors. But the moment his eyes landed on the older man, Ryan let out a small yelp. His legs gave out and he dropped onto the floor with a thud. Behind me, Ryan's eyes widened in terror as he shouted,
The CEO?
Ryan's words shocked me as well, and I stared at the two visitors in front of me. The elderly man glared at Ryan before handing me a business card and introducing himself. It really was the CEO of Ryan's company. Still confused as to why the CEO himself was standing at our door, I hesitantly returned his greeting. At that moment, the young woman beside him stepped forward and spoke in a calm, steady voice.
I apologize for the sudden visit. I'll explain everything.
She introduced herself as one of Ryan's coworkers from the public relations department at the same large bakery company. She was also a friend of Emily's and had attended the wedding a few days ago. It seemed she had witnessed the scene where I was publicly humiliated during the reception. That alone had left her feeling disgusted. But then she noticed something even more troubling. The pastry used to harass me had been one of their company's products. She had been deeply upset that their brand was used in such a way. But what disturbed her even more was that Ryan, her colleague, had laughed during the whole ordeal. She explained that she had been shocked and outraged when she saw Ryan's behavior and immediately reported it to her superior. Upon hearing the story, the CEO decided to personally come and apologize, which was why they had both shown up at our house.
Even though he's your husband, I sincerely apologize that one of our employees used our company's product to humiliate you. I take full responsibility and offer my deepest apologies.
No, it's not your fault, sir. Receiving such a polite and formal apology from someone so unexpected left me flustered and unsure how to respond. As I stood there, overwhelmed, the CEO turned his piercing gaze to Ryan, who was still sitting on the floor in shock. With an unwavering voice, he declared,
A public relations officer who doesn't respect or care for our products has no place in this company. You're fired, effective immediately.
Wait, please, sir. You're firing me over something like this?
Ryan frantically raised his voice in protest, but when the CEO shot him a sharp glare, he fell silent. Then the CEO's expression softened, and he turned to me with an unexpected proposal.
This may be presumptuous of me, but would you be willing to design a character for our company?
What? I never expected Ryan's company CEO to ask me for such a thing. Dumbfounded, my mouth slightly open. I was indeed working as an illustrator, but I wasn't particularly well known yet. Why would the CEO of Ryan's company know about me? Sensing my confusion, the young woman beside him smiled and answered my unspoken question.
The truth is, I'm a big fan of your work. When I showed your illustrations to the CEO, he thought your style would be a perfect fit for our company's image. And that's how this idea came about.
My face flushed with excitement, and my heart raced at this unexpected stroke of luck. With a job this big, I could support myself comfortably on my own income. Determined not to let this incredible opportunity slip away, I accepted the offer without hesitation. It would be an honor. I'm looking forward to working with you. I grasped the young woman's hand firmly as I spoke. She seemed a bit surprised by my enthusiasm, but quickly broke into a smile and warmly squeezed my hand in return. Then I turned around and, with a bright smile, spoke to Ryan, who was staring at the scene in utter disbelief. Thanks for waiting. Now I can finally get that divorce.
What?
As soon as I find a place to live, I'll move out. I'll send you the bill for the alimony later. Don't forget.
Wait, hold on a second.
Ryan mumbled something under his breath, but I ignored him completely and continued discussing the project details with the CEO and his colleague. Later, my divorce from Ryan was finalized, and I was finally free of him. Ryan had resisted until the very end, insisting, I won't agree to the divorce. But when he realized I was absolutely unwavering, he finally gave in. With a scowl, he signed the divorce papers. Having lost both his family and his job, Ryan became a hollow shell of himself, drifting from one temporary job to another. It seemed his dismissal from his previous company left a stain that made it difficult for him to find another permanent position. The older he gets, the harder it will be for him to secure a stable job, so he's likely in for a rough time ahead. But none of that has anything to do with me anymore. As long as Ryan paid the alimony, I couldn't care less what happened to him. Meanwhile, Emily, who had been disowned by our father, became the subject of bad rumors spread by her co-workers who attended the wedding. Unable to withstand the shame, she eventually resigned from her job. As for the groom's company, which was informed of the contract termination during the reception, their financial situation worsened until they went bankrupt. Because of this, the newlywed couple argued constantly and ended up divorcing shortly after. Considering their marriage lacked any real love to begin with, I suppose this outcome was inevitable. After the divorce, I quickly moved into an apartment perfect for living on my own and began enjoying a comfortable life. My father kindly told me I was welcome to move back into the family home, but I didn't want to burden him, especially considering his health. So I gratefully accepted the offer in spirit, but politely declined. However, to ensure I could be there quickly if anything happened, I chose a new apartment close to my family home. Now I'll be able to visit my father more often than ever. The project I received from my ex-husband's former company was successfully completed, and the character I designed was well received by both employees and customers alike. Thanks to that job, my recognition as an illustrator grew, and new commissions started pouring in. I'm so busy now that I barely have time to rest, but I find this kind of business refreshing. Being able to make a living doing what I love is a dream come true. Having left my marriage behind and embraced a fresh start, I'm living each day to the fullest, moving forward toward a bright future.